Hi everyone, it's William with a new installment of the Grand Duke Dmitri Diary series for 1921. I'm changing the background a little bit. Still doesn't look good, but I've been procrastinating so much with making my little studio. I mentioned that in the summer and it still isn't finished. So I thought I'd try this. Lighting's not good. I'm having that problem too in my little studio to be, but anyway, so it goes. I can tell you I am very, very proud of our friend today. I maintain that he was quite a decent person, a good man overall. Not a wonderful man, don't let's go too far, not a saint, but he had a sort of foundational decency about him. And a lot of times people don't give him credit for knowing what he was and who he was and what his convictions were. And I'm not talking about that in the sense of being a Grand Duke, but as a human being. There are many works that talk about how vulnerable he was to other people's influence. And yeah, he was. He took people sort of as they came to him, and he could be influenced by them, but only to a certain point, because he really had firm beliefs and he stuck to them. And that is the crucial thing in this particular part of the diaries that we're going through, that these men that he was meeting with in Berlin had ideas that ultimately he found he couldn't stand behind. He remained true to his own convictions, and I admire him about that, because I admire that about him because there are so many people who don't, and we're seeing a lot of that in our modern world of 2024, now going into 2025. What happens when people who claim to have firmly held convictions suddenly don't anymore? So you're going to have to a certain extent, you're going to have to take my word for it today, because we are not going to see how this works itself out until later. So right now, he's simply meeting with these people and finding them interesting. So, but we'll talk about that on the other side. So to recap yesterday's, this is too high up, isn't it? To recap yesterday's installment, he had arrived in Berlin and was surprised to be met at the train station by 15 people, and then to discover that these apartment, or he actually says it's apartments at this Grand Excelsior Hotel in Berlin, had been taken for him, and that there were actually 6 guards officers on duty, 6 all at once, as his entourage. And yeah, he was alarmed by that. One question I would very, very much like to know is who was paying for this, because they wouldn't have dared to pay for these apartments and these, the guards were probably, the officers were probably volunteers, but they would not have dared to put that on Dmitri's own bill without consulting him, and he simply couldn't have afforded it. But that is neither here nor there. So today's top topic is continuing on with the right-wing emigres in Berlin, but we have a very interesting person that we're going to be talking about today. He is called Markov II. If you read any books about or written by Russian emigres from this time period, you're going to find him always referred to as Markov II, but he had an actual name. His name was Nikolai Evgenievich, and he was a Duma member before the revolution, and the reason he's called Markov II is because there was another Duma member also called Markov, who was older and apparently had the honor of being Markov I. So the part of the diary that I'm doing today is very small, because there's really a lot that has to be said about Nikolai Markov. And this is where we really see things falling apart for Dmitri. So what he's doing now in Berlin is going to just destroy his aspiration to be a leader in the emigration and to be a future Tsar, the Tsar in waiting, so to speak. This is just going to be over after Berlin, and Markov is part of why that happens. And tomorrow, the reason I cut this section of diary off so short is because after this paragraph about Markov, Dmitri will start talking about another one of the Berlin monarchists, an equally sinister man called Biskupski. And so I don't want to try and deal with Biskupski and Markov in the same video. In fact, we'll see how this goes. I may have to do another addendum video to talk about Markov. And as I said, I absolutely would not do that just for the sake of enjoying it, if it wasn't so relevant to the rest of Dmitri's life, and the stand he decided to take. And I should give a trigger alert, or whatever you want to call it, for this particular installment and the ones to come, because it gets into some very, very sensitive territory. And there are still people who could be hurt by this because they are the children and grandchildren of Russian emigres or great-grandchildren, and because they are people who venerate the Romanovs, whether on religious grounds or on other grounds because they feel a personal connection to them, and that's all very, very legitimate. I'm not going to dismiss anybody's hurt feelings, but this is a part of the Russian emigration between the wars and during the Second World War that simply has to be grappled with. And that is, in some instances, there was a move toward fascism and even active collaboration with the Nazis. And some members of the imperial family got a little caught in that web. Happily, Dmitri wasn't one of them. But even before the revolution, with Nicholas and Alexandra, there was a little bit of a stain that came from willingness to meet with and be involved with people, extremists on the right. So, yeah, don't shoot the messenger, I guess is what I'm trying to say. And I love comments all the time. Any comments I can get, I love, but I definitely don't want to have any political discussions with anyone. So let's keep it on, the basis of history and our interest in Dmitri himself. And yeah, I mean, I should say I've encountered it pretty much twice in my research that has brought me into contact with members of the descendants of the emigre communities in France and in England. Not outside of those two countries, and through my godmother, who was born in London, but whose mother and father both escaped revolutionary Russia and were very active parts of the Russian emigration in England, and very much upstanding people. They had nothing to do with all of this. But I've had, in two instances, well, in one instance, I went to talk to an old Russian aristocrat and his wife, quite elderly at that time, in Paris. I got an introduction, and I was able to go and meet with them, and they were just the nicest people, and I really enjoyed talking to them. The father of the husband, had been someone that Dmitri knew. And appeared several times in the diary. And on my way out the door, they said, "Oh, we've got this for you." And it was a little booklet about how Jews and Freemasons had destroyed Russia. And that was a little awkward, and I still have the book, and it surprised me. It really surprised me. They were such warm and generous people, and I still like them. And, these ideas take root in people, and I don't know what to say. You have to take them seriously. You can't just shrug your shoulders, but it is what it is. And also, I knew from the emigre descendant who had put me in touch with this man that he had fought with the Germans during World War II. And that at the end of the war, he had been rescued by another white Russian who was fighting with the British, and who found him hiding in a barn or something like that, and was able to get him false papers and that sort of thing, so that, the chickens never came home to roost as far as that went. So that was interesting to me. And, I'd probably been pretty naive in not thinking about how there are these sensitivities. And, if people don't always respond in a way that makes you feel like your inquiries are welcome, there can be things going on in the past that you don't, it's too sensitive. So another instance, some emigre descendants that I knew in London, and they had, she was an aunt, I think, of one of them, who was the notorious Anna Volkova, who'd been involved with espionage against Great Britain during the Second World War. There's a book about her called, I think, Rendezvous at the Russian Tea Room, and they told me some firsthand stories about her. She actually was arrested and went to prison during the war, but they said that she remained an unrepentant Nazi sympathizer until the end of her life. But on one occasion, when she came round for dinner, there was a little dinner party with various Russian emigres, and this was long after the war, and people were receiving her. But she stood up at the table after they'd all sat down and before they started to eat. She actually stood up and said, I feel obligated to tell you all that I have been to prison. And this was years after that, but I guess she considered that was her moral obligation in case they objected to having dinner with someone who'd been to prison. But she didn't say, I feel obligated to inform you all that I still think Nazism was a good idea. So, anyway, that was her the thing that she was ashamed of was not the thing that I personally would have been ashamed of. But, there you go. Okay, so now I'm already 13 minutes into this. What am I going to do? Okay, and I also came across something that kind of shocked me at the Bakhmetov archive in not in Washington, D.C., in New York City. It's attached to Columbia University, and I should have copied it, but at the time I was kind of like, oh, I hope nobody else finds this, but, kind of this knee-jerk reaction, but it was something signed by Kirill's son, Vladimir Kirillich, giving some sort of preliminary approval to working with the Nazi regime in relation to Ukraine. And I don't want to libel anybody. I mean, the paper is there. You can go and look at it. But I'm sticking my neck out here because I don't have a copy of it and I don't remember exactly what it said. And so through Vladimir's mother, of course, Grand Duchess Victoria, Ducky, she had some sympathies in that direction. And, like I said, it is what it is. I consider it, sort of an offensive act against anybody, whatever their past is, to try to rob them of who they were. Even if I don't like who they were, I think the minute you try and put someone up as a kind of archetypal figure, you really rob them of their humanity. And if there are skeletons in someone's closet, then do them the do the right thing in terms of acknowledging who they were and who, in many instances, who they wanted to be, who they wanted people to see them as. We can say, well, this was the historical environment that they were in. But I'm not one for making excuses. We all have sort of a basic idea of what's right and wrong. And if people make the wrong decisions, then that's part of who they were. We're all capable of that. And some people, when the moment comes, rise to the occasion, and some people don't. But we don't want to strip them of their dimensions and make them one-dimensional figures. That's my, I'm never going to try and disguise things from you in relation to Dmitri. Obviously, you know that if I didn't find him an admirable, or at least, as I say, a decent person, I would never have spent all these years researching his life and writing about him. I just wouldn't have. But I'm sure there are some things that some people, will find very offensive about him, and that's okay. I don't want to disguise anything. So, should I stop now after that lecture? Let me just quickly read the actual section of the diary. This is the long diary entry of 15th of March. As you hear me say every day, it was written in Paris, which is why on the YouTube, not the title, but the description, I always describe it as being Paris, 15th of March, Paris, 1921. But it's describing what Dmitri did in Berlin. And okay, here we go. He told us his parting words in the last diary section were, I will set aside all these descriptions for the moment and speak in general terms about what I found in Berlin with respect to organizations. So here we go. It seems to me that the most serious political organization of a strictly party nature is the group formed by Markov II, the famous leader of the far right. I talked to him, of course, and he made a very positive impression on me. In the first place, he surprised me with his ideas. From Markov II, I expected a frightfully narrow-minded kind of monarchist doctrine. I thought qu'il sera plus royaliste que le roi. So I thought that he would be more royalist than the king. I thought he would be a grab it and don't let go kind of person, ultraviolet in color. But it turns out that the revolution taught him a thing or two, and he has become more liberal than before. Aha, you don't say. That's me, by the way. His group apparently obeys him unconditionally with respect to party discipline. All right, my friend, this positive impression. Well, I think Markov II is on his best behavior. I think he knows that Dmitri is likely not to like what he stands for, so he's being, he's taking pains to show that no, he's not an extremist. He's not ultraviolet in color. I'm not sure exactly what that means. Dmitri uses that expression from time to time, and it always makes me think of A Clockwork Orange with ultraviolet, but it's not. It's ultraviolet in color. Well, I do promise you that this will end well with respect to our friend Dmitri emerging from it without compromising his beliefs. But you're going to have to be patient with that for a moment, and I'm definitely going to stop here and do another addendum, this one about the person of Nikolai Yevgenyevich Markov, otherwise known as Markov II. All right, I hope you'll come back for that. Bye.